Imagine for a moment that you are flipping through the pages of an ancient manuscript, your fingers feeling the rough texture of aged parchment. The words before you are not familiar. They are not from the sacred book we know as the Bible. These are the Apocryphal Gospels, stories that have been kept in the shadows, away from common knowledge, yet they offer a fascinating and sometimes controversial view of the life of Jesus and his teachings. The Apocryphal Gospels are ancient texts dating from the early centuries of Christianity, written by devoted followers but not included in the official biblical canon. While the four canonical Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were accepted by the Church as authentic accounts of the life and ministry of Jesus, these other Gospels were left out. But why? To understand this, we need to go back in time, to an era of religious fervor and intense theological debate. The formation of the biblical canon was not an instantaneous process, but a long and complex journey. Early church leaders, in an effort to maintain doctrinal purity and avoid heresies, had to decide which texts would be considered inspired and worthy of teaching to the faithful. The Apocryphal Gospels, although often fascinating and spiritually rich, did not meet these rigorous criteria. Some were deemed divergent in their theological interpretations, others suspicious in their origin. However, these writings did not completely disappear. They survived on the margins, preserved by communities and scholars who believed in their value. And so, we are left with a collection of texts that offer an alternative and sometimes more human glimpse of familiar figures like Jesus and his disciples. These texts challenge our perceptions and invite us to explore a broader spectrum of spiritual stories and teachings. In this study of the Apocryphal Gospels, we will unravel the secrets kept in these ancient manuscripts, discover the stories that did not make it into the biblical canon, and understand why they were set aside. Prepare for a journey through ancient texts that continue to intrigue and inspire, even in the shadow of the canonical scriptures. If you're as intrigued as we are by these hidden stories and the mysteries of the Apocryphal Gospels, don't miss the next installment in this series. Subscribe to our channel to follow all parts of this fascinating journey through ancient texts. Click the subscribe button now and turn on notifications to be the first to discover what comes next. Let's uncover together the secrets kept in the shadows of history. Our next step takes us to the origins of the Apocryphal Gospels. These intriguing texts did not arise in a single place or moment, but were composed over the early centuries of Christianity, in different regions and under diverse circumstances. Each of these Gospels carries a unique history, often emerging in response to specific needs within the Christian communities of the time. Some were written to fill gaps in the narratives of the canonical Gospels, offering additional details about the life of Jesus and his teachings that were not included in the accounts accepted by the Church. Others were motivated by a fervent quest to understand deeper aspects of the Christian faith, exploring theological themes that diverged from predominant interpretations. The diversity of motivations behind the creation of these apocryphal texts reflects not only the theological complexity of the time, but also the richness of spiritual expression among early Christians. While leaders of the early church sought to establish a cohesive and authorized biblical canon, many of these Gospels did not fit the rigorous criteria set for acceptance. Thus, even as the Apocryphal Gospels were not considered for inclusion in the official canon, they continued to be valued by certain Christian communities and scholars who recognized their spiritual and historical importance. In the moments ahead, we will continue to explore not only who wrote them and where they were written, but also the lasting impact of these texts beyond the scope of the canonical scriptures. This gospel provides a direct and introspective view of Jesus' teachings, exploring themes such as the nature of spiritual wisdom and the personal relationship with the divine. Another notable gospel is the Gospel of Judas, which has garnered significant attention for its alternative narrative about the role of Judas Iscariot in Jesus' story. This text challenges traditional interpretations and proposes a more complex and intriguing view of the events surrounding Jesus' betrayal. Each of these apocryphal Gospels offers a window into understanding not only the historical and theological context in which they were written, but also the diverse interpretations and spiritual reflections that permeated the Christian communities of the time. As we explore these texts, it is fascinating to observe how they complement and sometimes contradict the accounts found in the canonical Gospels, thereby enriching our understanding of early Christianity and the central figures that shaped this faith. As we delve into the Apocryphal Gospels, we encounter a rich tapestry of themes and narratives that often stand out as distinct from the canonical Gospels. These texts explore not only the teachings of Jesus, but also broaden their focus to include stories and details not found in the church-accepted accounts. One of the most striking differences is the emphasis on mystical and esoteric elements, revealing a more deeply spiritualized view of Jesus and his disciples. While the canonical Gospels often focus on historical events and miracles, the Apocryphal Gospels frequently explore aspects of the inner life and personal relationships of biblical characters. Furthermore, we find narratives that challenge the conventional view of figures such as Mary Magdalene, Peter, and other disciples, offering more complex and humanized portraits of their lives and spiritual journeys. These apocryphal texts, therefore, not only expand our understanding of familiar biblical stories, but also enrich our appreciation of the diversity of theological perspectives that existed among early Christian communities. As we delve deeper into the contents of the Apocryphal Gospels, we are challenged to consider how these texts can inform and enrich our own spiritual and historical understanding of ancient Christianity. We will continue our journey through these intriguing works, exploring the differences and connections they establish with the canonical Gospels, thus offering a more comprehensive and multifaceted view of the roots of this global faith. As we delve into the Apocryphal Gospels, we are confronted with striking theological differences compared to the canonical Gospels. These texts often present varied and sometimes divergent interpretations on central issues of the Christian faith, such as the nature of Jesus, the role of salvation, and human destiny. One notable difference lies in the conception of Jesus as a divine figure versus a human figure. While the canonical Gospels emphasize the divinity of Jesus Christ and his redemptive role unequivocally, the Apocryphal Gospels explore additional nuances, offering portraits that emphasize his humanity and the complexities of his spiritual journey. Furthermore, we encounter debates on topics like human destiny and free will, where some apocryphal texts suggest interpretations that diverge from the doctrines established by the Church. These divergences not only reflect the rich diversity of thought among early Christian communities, but also illuminate the theological and ethical challenges faced by the early followers of Jesus. In exploring these differences, we are invited to consider how the Apocryphal Gospels not only complement but also challenge our traditional understandings of early Christianity. We will continue to examine these theological and doctrinal divergences, exploring their impact on the early Church's view of Christian faith and practice. The Apocryphal Gospels underwent a complex process of acceptance and rejection by the early Church. This process was neither uniform nor quick, but rather a result of theological discussions and criteria established by ecclesiastical leaders of the time. Several factors contributed to the decision to accept or reject a text as part of the biblical canon. One fundamental criterion was the apostolicity of the text, its connection to the apostles or those closely associated with them. Apocryphal Gospels that failed to establish a direct link to the apostles were often dismissed as less reliable compared to the canonical Gospels, which were widely accepted as having been written by eyewitnesses or their direct contemporaries. Furthermore, doctrinal orthodoxy played a crucial role. Texts that significantly diverged from the beliefs and teachings accepted by the Church were often considered dangerous or heretical, and their circulation was discouraged or prohibited. This discernment process took time and was influenced by intense debates among leaders of the early Church, who sought to maintain doctrinal unity and protect the integrity of the emerging Christian faith. The acceptance or rejection of an apocryphal gospel could depend not only on its theological content, but also on its popularity among Christian communities and the authority of its proponents. The influence of the apocryphal gospels on art, literature, and culture throughout the centuries has been profound and multifaceted. Despite being outside the official canon, these texts have inspired a rich tradition of artistic and literary representations that expanded biblical narratives and enriched popular understanding of religious figures. In art, especially during the medieval and Renaissance periods, The Apocryphal Gospels served as a source of inspiration for painters and sculptors seeking to depict not only sacred events, but also the more human and emotional aspects of Christian stories. Figures such as Mary Magdalene, whose role in the Apocryphal Gospels often differs from the canonical portrayal, were frequently depicted with psychological depth and emotional resonance reflecting these alternative narratives. In literature, the Apocryphal Gospels have influenced writers over the centuries, from early Christian apologists to modern authors exploring themes of spirituality and faith. These texts offer new perspectives on topics such as the nature of Jesus, the relationship between the divine and the human, and the role of women in Christian history, continually challenging and enriching theological and literary discourse. Culturally, the Apocryphal Gospels have contributed to the diversity of interpretations and practices within Christianity, encouraging a broader and more inclusive understanding of faith. Their stories and teachings continue to resonate in contemporary works and academic debates, fueling discussions about the nature of religious authority, the variety of Christian traditions, and the spiritual significance of expanded biblical narrative. Exploring the influence of the Apocryphal Gospels on art and culture reminds us of the richness and complexity of Christian traditions and the ways in which these texts continue to shape our understanding of religious and spiritual history. The discoveries of apocryphal manuscripts, such as those found in the Nag Hammadi Library, represent significant milestones in the study of the Apocryphal Gospels. These ancient documents, many of which were concealed for centuries, offer valuable insights into the spiritual practices and beliefs of early Christian communities beyond the conventional norms of the time. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, unveiled an impressive collection of apocryphal texts, including Gospels like those of Thomas, Philip, and Mary Magdalene. These manuscripts provide a detailed view of the diverse expressions of early Christianity, often focusing on esoteric teachings and mystical interpretations that diverge from the canonical Gospels. The importance of these discoveries extends beyond mere historical curiosity. They challenge and enrich our understanding of the origins of Christianity and the theological complexities that marked its early development. By studying these manuscripts, scholars have the opportunity not only to reconstruct the historical and cultural contexts of early Christians, but also to explore the deep roots of the spiritual traditions that shaped Western religious thought. Archaeological findings continue to play a crucial role in the study of the Apocryphal Gospels, offering new perspectives and challenges to established narratives, while inspiring debates and reflections on the diversity and evolution of Christianity over the centuries. Controversies surrounding the Apocryphal Gospels persist to this day, reflecting academic, theological, and historical debates about their authenticity and relevance for contemporary biblical studies. While some scholars advocate for including these texts as valid sources for a broader understanding of early Christianity, others question their legitimacy and impact on the established canon. One of the main arguments in favor of the Apocryphal Gospels is their potential to offer new perspectives on biblical figures and events, as well as to fill historical gaps left by the canonical Gospels. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, contain sayings attributed to Jesus that are not present in the Synoptic Gospels, providing additional insights into his spiritual message and ethical teachings. On the other hand, critics raise concerns about the authenticity and dating of the Apocryphal Gospels, often questioning their connection to the historical events described in the Bible. Moreover, the theological divergence between these texts and the canonical Gospels can be seen as a barrier to their universal acceptance within the Christian tradition. The debate also extends to the issue of spiritual and interpretative authority. While proponents of the Apocryphal Gospels argue that their inclusion enriches theological and historical diversity within Christianity, others argue that canonizing these texts may dilute the authority of the canonical Gospels and potentially confuse the faithful. Ultimately, controversies surrounding the Apocryphal Gospels highlight the complexity of religious history and the variety of voices that contributed to the formation of Christian scriptures. The discussion continues to inspire academic investigations and theological reflections, fostering ongoing dialogue about the nature of divine revelation, scripture interpretation, and the diversity of spiritual experiences within Christianity. The apocryphal books play a crucial role in understanding early Christianity, offering alternative and complementary perspectives to canonical texts. While the Synoptic Gospels and John are widely recognized, apocryphal texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, Mary Magdalene, and Philip bring additional narratives about the life of Jesus and teachings that expand our view of the early Christian movement. Historically, these texts provide insights into the practices and beliefs of ancient Christian communities that were not preserved in accepted Gospels. Theologically, they explore themes such as the divine nature of Jesus, the role of women in Jesus' ministry, and philosophical and spiritual issues that shape the thinking of early followers of Christ.